I'm going to call to order the December 16, 2019 Royal Oak City Commission meeting to order. We're going to begin with an invocation given by Mayor Pro Tem Paruch, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand if you can.
As we gather here this evening as another year rapidly comes to a close, and as we approach holiday celebrations of peace and goodwill, we are grateful for the community in which we live and for our families, friends, and colleagues that we share. We are grateful for those who are entrusted with keeping our community safe and extend our profound thanks to all of them for their dedicated service. We are also grateful for the sacrifices that our men and women of our armed forces have made since our nation was founded, so that freedom of expression and the civil rights that we hold dear are protected and celebrated. As we move forward to tackle the issues facing our community not only this evening but throughout the coming year, may we have wisdom to govern amid the conflicting interests and perspectives of the citizens of our community. May we have the ability to work together in harmony and goodwill even when there is honest disagreement. And may we always strive to do what is best for the Royal Oak community at large and its citizens as a whole, in an effort to keep Royal Oak a safe, inviting, and peaceful community in which to work and live. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, this brings us to item number 4 tonight, which is a presentation of check to the World War II Memorial Foundation. Mr. London.
Good evening. David London, Chair of the Veterans Events Committee. I'd like to take a moment to present a check to the Michigan World War II Legacy Memorial for the money that we raised at the WROK 22 March this year, 2 days before Veterans Day. I want to recognize 2 members from the Legacy Memorial, Kim Jones and Mike Cameron. This year, we raised $3,486.82, and we had, on top of that, we raised over 2,000 pounds of goods that were donated to needy and homeless veterans, as well as we had over 200 people this year participate in the WROK 22 March to raise awareness of veteran suicide. And on behalf of the Veterans Events Committee, I'd like to
thank you so much.
And on a personal note, I'd like to thank all the commissioners and everyone from the city who helped out on Veterans Day. We had a drastic change of plans. What was it, 9 inches of snow that day, and we quickly were able to shift the Veterans ceremony inside into the library, and I wanted to personally thank everyone for their help in making that happen. So thank you, and happy holidays.
Thank you, Mr. London. Kim?
Yeah, we'd like to thank the mayor and the city commission for all your support for the Michigan World War II Legacy Memorial and the WROK March 22. I want to give special thanks to Judy and Carol and David and all the volunteers that helped make this event possible. And also a big thanks to the Royal Oak Police Department for keeping our events safe. And we want to give a special thanks to VFW Post 1669 for allowing us to use their parking lot and giving us a place to warm up. Veteran suicide is a serious problem, and we hope this event will make the community more aware of this problem so that we can reduce this number. We can reduce the number of suicides. I want to thank everyone who participated and helped raise funds for the Michigan World War II Legacy Memorial and who donated food and supplies for the local food pantry. So once again, thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. We're very grateful for all the work that you guys are doing, your committee, helping bring this amazing memorial to our community. And it's just, I know we get a little preview of it again this summer, and really magnificent. I think it's going to be something that, you know, not only is a, you know, a shining point of our community, but a real place for education on how our great state contributed to victory in all the theaters of World War II. And I know you, I mean, mean, I don't know how you guys do it. This has got to be almost a full-time job. You're working hard, you're doing everything you can, and, you know, we want to partner with you in any way we can to make sure we get this built.
Yeah, well, we appreciate all your support. Thank you again.
Thank you. And Mr. London, thank you to you and the committee. Fantastic work. I mean, the WROK 22 March, I know this has only been a, what was it, third year? Third year. And it's growing every year. And, you know, it was amazing seeing the turnout and bringing awareness to a really, really important subject that, you know, we need to gather and garner more attention to. 22, that number, 22 veterans commit suicide every day. So, you know, appreciate all of your efforts. Thank you, gentlemen.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Happy holidays.
Thank you.
All right, this brings us to item 5, public comment. Just a few words on public comment. The City Commission values and relies upon the input of our fellow citizens to help make decisions. Now's the time set aside for the public to address the City Commission on any city-related issue, whether or not it's on the agenda. As there are no public hearings scheduled for tonight, this is the only opportunity to address the City Commission. I ask that you direct comments to the City Commission as a whole and not to individual commissioners. If you wish to speak tonight at public comment, please wait till you're recognized by me, the mayor. Come up to the podium, state your name and address for the record. Be mindful that, you know, we do want to hear from anyone who wishes to speak tonight, so comments are limited to 3 minutes. We have a timer at the podium to help you keep track of your time. If you don't wish to speak tonight, no problem. Many people reach out to us, various mediums, from email to telephone to stops at the grocery store. That's what we're here for, and if it's more convenient to go about that way, always your comments are always welcomed and needed. Please note the City Commission typically doesn't respond directly to public comment. However, we are taking notes, and when that particular agenda item comes up, we'll ask those questions that you bring to the public comment. If your item doesn't concern anything on the agenda, our city manager is taking notes, we're taking notes, and we try to follow up as appropriately. Just another note, I know tonight we have a few elements here, a few agenda items that pertain to marijuana establishments. So I just want to make sure everyone's aware. I don't think I'll expect any motions tonight about approving any ordinances or anything at this point. What we have is some draft language in front of us, some proposals, a piece of clay, if you will, that we can start, you know, modifying, adding, deleting, bringing our commentary towards that the city manager / city attorney has prepared for us. It's a long document. It's going to be a long process, but you got to start somewhere. So I don't want to create the perception that, you know, we're here tonight and we're going to approve an ordinance and there we go. So this is going to be a community-involved process every step of the way, but you got to start with pages of paper at some point to take a look at and see, you know, how it gets modified to work for us as a community. So with that, who's first tonight? We'll go with Mr. Tooman.
I'm here tonight to do a special shout out. It's something different than what I normally talk about. You've been very, very acknowledging of, you know, my charity, which serves 25,000 special needs and indigent children at this time of the year. We nearly lost the charity this year through no fault of our own. And I'm here tonight really to do a shout out, not to belabor anything. But there was a new company that bought out our storage lockers, and they decided to sand the floors in front of all the lockers. They didn't put up any vapor barriers, so all of the dust rose into all of the lockers in the facility, over 500 lockers. And it got all over my toys and my costumes and clothing that I give out to, you know, all over now. And we were in there trying to clean up, and we were coughing like crazy. We didn't know what it was. And we kept coughing and coughing, and finally we brought in a team from a restoration company to be able to determine what was going on and how they were going to approach this. It turned out that they did an independent testing study, and the dust that came into our locker was silica dust. Silica dust is, carcinogenic. It's what's been, actually killing the first responders in New York. So our lockers were condemned for about 5 months. We couldn't get in or get out to get anything that we needed. So we actually have started this program pretty much in the middle of November, when at this time of the year, we're pretty much, we've got our quota met. But I want to do a shout out to the citizens of Royal Oak that stepped up to help us. We have gotten, we've gotten support from all over the world now, because our Christmas morning program draws people from countries all over the world and from all over the United States. But Royal Oak stepped up in particular. There were some great, great people here. I'm honored very much to be a citizen here. And I want to thank those people, for caring enough to step forward to really save our charity. This is our 31st year, and we certainly didn't want to lose it. Thanks again for giving me space.
Thank you, Mr. Tooman. Yes, sir.
Corey Fields, 422 Austin, here to kind of give my little spiel about the marijuana microbusiness license in particular. First of all, it's been really cool watching this process play out. I've come to several of these meetings, and I've learned a lot about local government, and it's been really cool. I'm also really proud of my city, where I live, I work. My kids go to school here, so I'm very much a Royal Oak guy, and it's been very cool to see our city embrace this new world of cannabis, marijuana, and the potential benefit it can bring our city in terms of the excise tax. So I'm a potential business owner here, and I want to do business here. I don't want to go to Ferndale or Warren or anything like that. I want to do it here. This is going to be a small business. I'm not one of the big players. And as I said, I'm learning about zoning. These are all new things to me, but I've been studying, and and talking to people, and as it stands now, the proposed zoning, and I know there's a lot to figure out yet, and I respect that. The proposed zoning is kind of restrictive to what I view as the little guy, because the zoning is such that, we got all along Woodward. Basically, it's going to be like an upscale version of what 8 Mile was, just all on Woodward. Those rents, you can't even rent a place on Woodward. You got to buy. We got $1 million cash deposits. I mean, for a small business, pretty not a place that you can really locate to get your business off the ground. So I'm always out jogging. I'm looking on Catalpa and Lincoln. I'm like, oh, this little storefront, that'd be cool to do it there or something. But the zoning as it stands now, or at least the proposed zoning, you can't do it. So I've looked at it. I've looked at the zoning map. This past weekend, I went driving around to the 2 general industrial areas where they're allowing basically these things outside of Woodward. And it's not a place where I would want to set up a little shop. It's not really appropriate, it's just industrial. So what I would like to see is the council, the commission, the zoning board, however it all works, be open to the idea of overlay districts and allowing micro businesses who don't have millions and millions of dollars like those shops they're going to locate on Woodward. We're talking about small businesses, bootstrapped, friends and family. Be open to overlay districts in areas that we could use a little revitalization. There's some storefronts along Catalpa, like I said, Lincoln, that are vacant. It'd be great to do it there, and it's also affordable for a small business owner, and you're not looking at the kind of rents and money that you're looking at if you're located on Woodward. So let's not shut small businesses out. Let's not let all the big players come in and take over. Thank you.
Mr. Fields? Anybody else tonight? Ms. McGuire?
Hi, I'm Gail McGuire, 4456 Arlington Drive. And marijuana is a drug that influences people's behavior and not for the good. It is not a drug we want our children to be exposed to. By voting to have these stores in our neighborhood, you are sending the message to children that drugs are okay. Drugs are not okay. They destroy lives. I know many people who started on marijuana as teenagers and then went on to other drugs only to have the drugs eventually kill them. One of these people was my brother, and another within the last year was my friend's son. There's nothing good about drugs, especially for the teenagers who get involved and struggle with the drugs for their whole lives. So please don't send the message to these people that drugs are okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McGuire. Anybody else? Going once? Mr. McGuire.
Hi, I'm Mick McGuire. In the last 20 years, Royal Oak has made some major changes. It's got a new downtown, tearing down old homes, putting in new homes. I think we should stay the course and not let something like marijuana possibly become a deterrent from people wanting to move here, okay? You've done a good job so far. I don't think you should let marijuana derail the job that's being done here, because this city has really changed a lot. When I moved here, there were tumbleweeds blowing down Main Street. And you guys have done a really good job. Places look nice. You got homes going up here over $500,000, and I think that we should stay the course on that and not have something other that people may think that's shady or that doesn't look so good in their neighborhood for sure. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McGuire. Anybody else wish to speak tonight at public comment? All right, I'm going to close public comment, bring the meeting back to this side of the table. That brings us to item number 6, which is the approval of the agenda. Commissioner Macy.
Move approval.
A motion by Commissioner Macy, second by Commissioner Dubuck. Discussion? All right, with none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes. Our agenda set. This brings us to item number 7, which is the consent agenda. Does anyone wish to pull anything off the consent agenda? Commissioner Lavasser.
I would like to pull item E.
E, contract modification to contract cap 1915, 2019 asphalt resurfacing improvements. Anybody else? Okay, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as modified? Mayor Pro Tem Paruch? Moved?
Yes.
Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Douglas. All right, the consent agenda now consists of claims from December 2017, 2019, approval of purchase orders, declaration and disposal of surplus property, approval of Huntington Bank purchase card agreement, receive and file non-action items. GASB statements number 67, 68, accounting and financial reporting for pensions, June 30th, 2019, and GASB statements number 74 and 75, accounting and financial reporting for post-employment benefits other than pension, June 30th, 2019. Any discussion? All right, with that, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes. This brings us to formally item E from the consent agenda. Commissioner Lavasser.
The proposal that's before us is to basically take a contract from this past year for I imagine road work, things of that nature, and add close to $2.2 million to that same contract for next year without going out to bids. I know the engineer believes that if we were to go out to bids, that the bids would come in higher than this figure, but to me that's not logical. I'm looking for a little feedback on why the engineer believes that this would be cheaper than putting this out to bids. It would seem to me that the same company, if they want this contract, could simply submit a bid for this figure through an open bid process.
Mr. Callahan?
This contract This contract is the same type of contract that we've bid twice before, three times before. Ajax has been the successful bidder. They're a great contractor. They do excellent work. We've changed order quite a bit of other work into their contracts. We awarded them a second year of a similar amount of money in 2015 and 2017 to those contracts, and this is very similar to what we've done in the past. We talked to people in the industry. They're telling us the prices are going up, considerable increases in concrete prices, up to 8 to 10%. In some respects is what they're predicting right now. There's a very large freeway project that's happening in the Metro Detroit region, and those types of large projects gobble up a lot of the concrete that's available in the area. Concrete is a small part of what this contract is about. The majority of the costs are in the asphalt, and the contractor has agreed to keep all of their other prices the same with some minor increases and actually a decrease in one price for some undercutting. It's roughly a little over $100,000 increase in cost, but we believe that this, keeping the other costs the same, we're going to, the contractor can actually go ahead right now, if this gets awarded, and start ordering materials for next year and getting things already set up. There's some processes that are sped up by this, and right now we just don't see, based on all the other contracts for all the other road work we've done, any decrease in any costs over the last 6 years of doing roadwork contracts. So, we fully expect prices to go up. Certainly we could put this out to bid. However, we would probably see the prices, we would predict that would be more money, just based on what we've been seeing with other contracts.
Questions for Mr. Callahan? Commissioner Dubak.
Mr. Callahan, how long have you been doing this?
As the city engineer or just in general?
Assessing road contracts.
20 plus years.
Okay. So in that time, have there been times where you would think this price isn't acceptable, we should go out to market, you've made that we should go out to bid, you've made that recommendation previously?
More than once, yes.
All right. So this is based on your lengthy experience and an understanding that market demand is going up, and so prices are therefore likely going up?
Yes, absolutely.
And you've seen that throughout your career?
Yes, there's been very few instances in the last 24 years that I've seen something come in under budget.
Okay. So maybe there's an inkling of a chance if we go out to bid that we save some pennies, but it's definite that if it comes back, it's going to be dollars that we're losing.
We're sure that these prices are locked in. And like I said, we've bid this project out every other year. We want to make sure that we're getting the best contractor and the best prices, and we feel comfortable saying that Ajax is one of the better companies that we've had to deal with on all of our road projects, and for the most part, they're keeping 90% of their prices the same.
I'm with you. What we've seen over the last few years is bid after bid, concrete prices are going up. There is no reason to think that it's going to go down. So we have a contractor that we have a good experience with that's giving us a reasonable price and get it done on time, because we know that time costs us money. There's no reason not to move forward with this. So I'll move for approval.
We have a motion by Commissioner Dubak. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Paruch. Just one clarification before Commissioner Douglas. You mentioned that you had bid this out. Also, in addition to what Commissioner Dubak was saying, I think one additional clarification is, this isn't like a renewal every year. You bid this out every other year anyway, so we have contemporary pricing under the existing contract that we're using as a benchmark.
That is correct.
Yeah. Commissioner Douglas.
So my time frames may be a little off here, but as an illustration, we built the parking structure over by the post office here, 3 years ago. And about 6 months after that, we started planning to build the parking structure that's now here on 11 Mile. And we had received open bids, competitive bids on the first parking structure, chose the low bidder, Colasanti, and Colasanti offered to build the adjacent parking structure here at the same rates as the one by the post office. But We thought, no, we need to go out for competitive bids. That's the right thing to do. That's what the city charter said. So we did, and Colasanti was the successful bidder at a price $250,000 higher than it would have cost us initially. I have great faith in our engineering department and our professional staff making sensible decisions that benefit the city of Royal Oak, and I will be supporting this motion.
Any other discussion? Commissioner Lavasser?
I'm all for saving money, obviously. I just have a hard time with the logic that this particular company, if this were to go out to bid, would not place this as their bid. You know, there seems to be the assumption that if we're going out to bid, they're not going to still honor this number. They're going to go with a higher number, and I just logically don't understand how we're reaching that conclusion.
Can I answer? Yeah, sure. Well, one of the things that Ajax does every year, and we aren't their only customer, they have to plan in advance what projects and how many projects and how much staff they have to staff those different projects all across the metro region. If they can lock in these prices and lock in their workers and guarantee that their workers are going to have work to do, they don't have to work so hard to get other work from other communities. And when we put this out to bid, they're bidding against other people. And if they don't get the job for some reason, you know, say somebody decides and they want to come in lower, Ajax is out trying to make sure that their workers have work to do. I mean, it's a very tough industry to be in, and this just, by locking them in now with these secure prices, you know, they know that they've got work to do. They can continue to work in Royal Oak and come back and do a good job for us.
Yeah, and maybe I can add, for someone who helps for a living prepare some of these, you know, proposals to, let's say, the auto industry. You know, there's a cost to risk and uncertainty, and there's a benefit with familiarity. And, you know, that really helps affect pricing. Everything that Matt said is absolutely accurate. And if you think about it from if you took a microeconomics course back in the day, you know, if you have, let's say, a bunch of capacity, the first stuff you're selling on that capacity, you're kind of just, you know, moving along, liquidating. Well, we know that every contractor is going to probably get booked up with the construction that's going on in the region with roads. If you're the last one to come in and you want the last, you know, 10 hours of that contractor's cement work, you're going to pay through the roof for it because, you know, they've booked up. So getting in on early, they can predict their schedules, they can order, they can lock in concrete contracts, they can lock in a bunch of other stuff. If we go out to bid on this, even though we just bid it a year ago, if we go out to bid, then what happens, they got 4, 5, 6 months, whatever, however long it takes, because you got to have the other bidders, you know, look at the data and look at the requirements and all of that. They're going to go lock contracts all over the area, and then they come in to bid on our RFP, and their position has changed because they've booked up their idle capacity. So if you think about it in a purely, you know, microeconomic sense, put yourself in the shoes of the contractor, there's often a strong rationale for them to reduce risk, uncertainty, book business, especially with a reliable partner like Royal Oak, where they have familiarity with the roads and we pay on time and we don't have financial issues and they're going to get paid for the work they do, and they work reasonably with our engineers, and it's a, you know, they don't have to spend millions of dollars in overhead fixing problems, getting sued, all this other stuff. It really makes sense for them to do it. So if they have to go out to bid, the timeline goes, and you know, if we're instead of first in line for next year, we're 10th in line, the price goes up. Any other discussion? All right, with that, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Nay. Callahan? All right, this brings us to item number 8 on the agenda, which is the acceptance of City of Royal Oak Retirement System 71st Annual Actuarial. It's our pension valuation report, June 30th, 2019. Ms. Rudd?
Good evening, Mayor, City Commissioners. Yes, this item we're requesting that you accept the 71st Annual Actuarial Report, which is the pension report. And also, to receive the Retirement Board's certification that the city contribution for fiscal year July 1, 2020 will be a minimum of $8,259,186. The commission letter simply summarizes the data that's provided in the report. I recommended that the commission read the entire report. There's a lot of good information included in the report. My letter summarizes it. I'm simply going to summarize the summary, and then if you have any questions, hopefully I can answer your question. But probably the most significant information in the report is to determine the employer's contribution rate for next fiscal year, and that is that $8,259,000 roughly. This is an increase in the current fiscal year's contribution of over $500,000, and mostly that is due to we did not reach our assumed rate of return that got averaged in the 4-year smoothing process. That this report does the 4-year smoothing. With that, I won't go over all the other details. Like I said, there's a lot of information in there, and answer any questions if you have.
Questions for Ms. Rudd? Mr. Lavasser?
Can you go in a little greater detail how it is that you arrived at the $515,000 extra contribution? I know it's based on the rate of return being, I think, 5.6% instead of 7.25%, but is this like an amortized amount, or is it a catch-up to get us to the amortized amount, or what is it?
If you look at page, let's see. A5. In the middle of the page, you'll see the 2019 column. And then if you go down to F, which is again almost in the middle of the page, what you see there is the current year, and you see a loss under the column 2019 of $646,000, and then you'll see 3 more numbers underneath that. Okay, what that is that $646,000 was the difference between what we should have gotten in returns versus what we actually received. So there's a loss of the $646,000, and then there's the $117,000 loss the next year. There's a gain of $1.4 million the next year, and then a loss of $3.3 million the next year. If you see those numbers, okay. Okay, so what had happened is those get averaged. And so that's where you get the total recognized investment loss of the $2.7 million. So we didn't, that $646,000, if we would have had like a 13% return, that would have been a positive large number, which would have helped that total recognized investment gain / loss. So what that does is that ticks up the contribution requirement, because we have so those losses. So actually next year that $3.3 million is going to drop off, and if we have a gain, that's going to help the ARC not increase next year.
Is this based upon an accounting formula or a state of Michigan mandated formula? What is this?
Well, the board makes the selection to smooth over 4 years. Some systems smooth over 10 years. It can be somewhat rocky if you're still a little rocky, but it's better than actually using the current year, because that's what you see in the GASB report. So it's what is market value of June 30th, 2019, and you just go with that number. And the market could just be drastically up or down on that day. So it's the board's decision within a range what to select, and they select 4 years, which is 3 or 4 years is my understanding, very typical for retirement boards to use, and to use that smoothing over 3 or 4 years. So it's to try to prevent the whipsawing back and forth every year to the ARC. So to make it a little more stable, even though it's kind of gradually going up, $500,000, at least it's somewhat stable, rather than, down $1 million one year, then up $1.5 million the next year.
Any other questions from Ms. Rudd? Mr. Macy?
Okay, I think I got that. This is making this chart make a lot more sense. So, I mean, my guess would be looking at this chart that our contribution would probably go down next year, right? If we're dropping off the 3.3 million and then.
Well, if we have it depends on how it looks June 30th of 2019, how the market looks.
Okay.
Yeah, hopefully it's gonna.
It's like the numbers are, like, that one seems like an outlier almost.
Well, and if you recall me mentioning a few times during the budget sessions, they're not so much saying it too much in the last few months, but the investment advisors, the two different investment advisors for the two different trusts, have warned us we are overdue for a correction. So.
Mayor.
Commissioner DeBuck.
So every month when we meet, with the retirement and healthcare boards, they give us a full rundown, not just where we stand, but kind of a detailed overview of market conditions and how those should inform our decision making. And 6 months ago, they were saying there's definitely a recession coming. Everyone's like hiding their money. And then over the last 2 months, they've softened that to just that growth has slowed, but people are somewhat less afraid. Am I saying that right? That's about what they've been telling us. So the addition, what we've been putting in is smaller, maybe smaller next year, but it should be small over time. As we take this little dip or slow down, and then the economy heats back up. But that's the point of it is to look at it not on even a 4-year smoothing, but as we discussed in the last meeting, the life of the system. And as long as we continue to put in, even in good times, whereas previous commissions in good times did not put in, as they're like, oh, we're fully funded. They were putting in their minimum contribution because they were fully funded, and then the market took a dip. So as long as this commission and future commissions continue to make those contributions in earnest, we're in good shape, is what the actuaries are telling us.
Well, I think we also have to balance that about, you don't want to invest high either. So you want to be a little careful about how much you could put it in, keep it in cash, and then put it in the equities, when things start to slow, but you don't want to buy high, sell low. That's not a great strategy, at least from what I saw at business school.
If I could just add to Commissioner Lavasser's comments, the investment advisors, are telling us for the long term, they feel good about the 7.25. However, about 2 years ago, they were saying for the next 10 years, look at an average of maybe about in the 6s. So if we see that, even if we don't have a major correction like we did in 2008, and we are for the next 8 years, because they've been saying this for a couple of years, we're only getting like 6.5%. We are missing the mark. And so that is going to hike up in the short term our contribution for the ARC.
Smoothing period, Commissioner Gibbs.
It's also about thinking in the future. If we continue the 8+ million, 25 million, it's like paying down the principal on your house. That's the easy way of looking at it. We have an awful lot of debt in the pension. And the more we are able to put into it and keep the city budget comfortable, the better it's going to be for us. So I fully support bumping it up a little bit this year, because the likelihood of a correction has way gone down, a huge correction. I invite you to come to one of our board meetings, the meeting with the trustees, and hear I'm not the expert, I'm not the investors, I'm not the financial guys, but the the likelihood of a huge correction has gone down, so paying a little bit more in is wise.
And we gotta balance the short and long term. I mean, obviously, we gotta be cognizant of what's working for us in our investments in the short term. But in the long term, what we contribute, what we put in, this is a multi-decade,
Right.
And if any of us could predict what the market's doing tomorrow, pretty sure we wouldn't be sitting up here at this table. We'd be sitting on our yacht, somewhere enjoying caviar and, all the fun stuff that I guess rich people do. So I think that, we're going to have our ups and downs, but, we always have to be cognizant of making sure that if we do start to see a period of a number of years we're a little below, we got to play a little catch up, because you can't just say, well, I'll play catch up 30 years from now. That's a bad idea too, But at the same time, you don't want to overreact and be like, oh my gosh, we went down by $2 million. We need to put $5 million in tomorrow. That's why we have actuaries. That's why we have competent people that can look at this. And, the biggest challenge we have with anything is not being able to predict, like the Great Depression, the Great Recession. I mean, these are things that are really anomalies in the blip of the decades, and those you just have to take a whole nother, unordinary set of measures to accommodate for that. But we have to plan on the ups and downs. And then when those really bad things, if they happen once every 50, 60 years, we got to address them for what they are at the time. So I don't know. Any more questions, Commissioner Dubak?
I'll move to receive the report.
A motion by Commissioner Dubak, seconded by Commissioner Paruch. Further discussion? Commissioner Paruch.
I would just add very briefly that having served on the retirement board as the commission representative for a relatively short period of time until we made the switch, I really came to appreciate the talent and expertise of our advisors. And there was a time when the advisors shifted because we created the new fund for just the healthcare issues. Not a new, but a relatively new advisor for that new fund. It's certainly an area of expertise that is very, very detailed and specific. It's more than just your general accounting. It's very, very complicated stuff. So I really appreciate the work that the two commission representatives have put into this in order to understand it, as well as all of the advisors and Ms. Rudd in terms of keeping this program relatively healthy. As Commissioner Dubak mentioned, there was a period of time when the system was relatively healthy, and at that time the commission thought, well, perhaps it is as healthy as it is. We don't need to make the annual contributions. As a result, when things really took a dive, about 10 years later, we didn't have a cushion. We didn't have a safety net. And we've been kind of struggling our way back up into a better position ever since then. So granted, the minimum of a little over $8 million is a little bit more than what we've done in prior years. It helps us to build that safety net, and I think that's a good thing. As long as we can do it, we might as well do it.
Right. And I'll just add to that, the board as well. I mean, I was part of the retirement board a number of years ago when I was a commissioner, and they're cutthroat between the commission representation and the employee representation. If there's an investment firm not performing, they're out. They're not just sitting back taking somebody's word for everything. They're really, they have the acumen that we would hope and expect out of a board managing this money. And, it's pretty, I guess, everyone has the incentive at that table to make sure that they're on top of it and that they make the right decision. So, it's a good team. Ms. Rudd?
May I say one more thing? On the pension contribution that gets calculated by the actuary, that is a required contribution by law. So now on the OPEB, it's more so of a recommended contribution, but on the pension, it is required. Right, just to add that.
Which number is required?
The 8 million to
59.
50, was it 59?
8259, which includes the 515 boost.
Correct.
All right. Without any further discussion, I'll call for the vote. Commissioner Gibbs?
May I just add one thing? And just if anyone is interested in joining us for our next meeting, it is Monday, January 6th at 8 a.m. in the room 309 over here. And you're invited. It's an open meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner Gibbs. All right, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Ms. Rudd. That brings us to item number 9, which is the confirmation of mayoral appointments. As you can see from the memorandum, we have some renewal of appointments for the Library Board of Trustees, Planning Commission, Commission for the Arts. For the Planning Commission, I'd like to thank Dan Godek for many years of service on the Planning Commission. He certainly was a strong, influential, and very convincing voice on planning and has helped shape a lot of the policy that we have here in Royal Oak today. With his experience on the Traffic Committee and this just bringing up unique perspectives that helped us make the very best possible decisions when it came to site plans and also ordinance changes. You could always count on Dan to contribute to the conversation and make sure that we were to task. And so I'm very grateful, and the entire city of Royal Oak is very grateful for Dan's service. And Dan got to the point where he was getting, termed out. So Dan, decided that, we'd give someone else a shot. And we're looking at Woody Gontina. And Woody has a fantastic background that I think is highly appropriate. We missed that construction experience on the, when Jeff Chase left, having that construction experience on the Planning Commission to really help, us understand that perspective is critical. And so we welcome Woody if this resolution passes to the Planning Commission. So with that, any questions? Commissioner Paruch?
I will move approval of this resolution.
A motion by Commissioner Paruch. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Douglas. Discussion? All right, with none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes. All right, this brings us to item number 10, which is the approval of November 2019 Traffic Committee resolutions. I think I see Mr. Callahan. I'm probably missing in that sweater.
Thank you. The Traffic Committee met on November the 19th, about a week earlier than normal, but the Thanksgiving was the following week. Minutes are attached as backup information, as well as the agenda items that were discussed. 2 resolutions were developed for your approval this evening on items 5A and 5B. Dan Godek can't be here tonight, but he did want me to wish everybody happy holidays and Merry Christmas. He had other plans for this evening. Item 5A was to review some limited sight distance on Webster Road for northbound traffic on Linwood, and the recommendation is to approve to prohibit parking on the south side of Webster, approximately 130 feet east of Linwood Avenue. This is kitty corner from Adams School, so there's a lot of traffic there on mornings and afternoons. The second item we discussed was the crosswalks on Maxwell at both Sherman and at Farnham. The corner of Farnham has a park, and Maxwell and Sherman are both major roads by our categorizing them. Sherman used to have crosswalks painted on the road when the Longfellow School was at the southwest corner of that intersection, and there used to be a traffic light there, but that got taken down after the school closed. But they are still major roads, and a lot of people walk in that area. So we're recommending installing the painting back on the roads at those 2 locations.
Questions for Mr. Callahan? No questions for Mr. Callahan. Commissioner Macy.
Move approval of the Traffic Committee's resolutions.
Motion by Commissioner Macy. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Gibbs. Discussion? All right, with none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Callahan. You're welcome. All right, that brings us to item number 11 on tonight's agenda, which is the award of contracts for technology work, Royal Oak Civic Center.
So, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, you have a proposal here for 3 awards for the WROK project, technology portions, passive optical local area network, server and storage devices, and the optical fiber ring. In addition, you have a contract renewal with 123.net, who has been providing our voice and data services for the last 4 years. Here to answer any questions you may have about it.
Questions for Mr. Kirby? Commissioner Lavasser.
I'm noting that the dollar figures in the in the resolutions are higher than what's in the bid amounts that are stated here. And I just want an explanation of why that is.
There's a 5% contingency added to each of the bid amounts.
All right, so that's like a little safety in case there's some...
Yep, in case we come across something that we see we want to change during design, or we run into any problems with the installation and implementation.
Okay, so if I'm understanding, we're budgeting it for it, but we're not entering into a contract for anything above what is being bid right here.
We would be entering into a not-to-exceed contract that includes the 5%.
If we didn't use the 5%, then we wouldn't
be billed for it.
It wouldn't be billed for.
How would there be a determination whether or not to pay the extra amount above and beyond the bid?
There'd have to be a change order submitted. So if they identify anything that they feel wasn't accounted for, then they would have to submit a change order saying that, we need to add this amount.
Okay, so if there are no change orders, and I know there always are change orders, but if there are no change orders, the bid price or the amount that was bid here, that would be the contract price?
Yes.
Commissioner Dubak.
To be clear, this is kind of industry standard across construction projects, not just municipal projects, but even private buildings are going to build in a certain percentage contingency for unexpected need, or if us doing the building wants to change something.
Correct.
We have that now in our budget to spend, so we're not spending beyond what we've accounted for.
Correct.
Industry standard.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Kirby? Commissioner Paruch?
I'll move approval of the resolution.
A motion by Commissioner Paruch, second by Commissioner Macy. Further discussion? All right, with none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? None. The motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Kirby.
Thank you.
Thank you for the hard work. All right, this brings us to item number 12, which is the extension of prohibition on marijuana establishments. First reading, Mr. Gillum.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor and Commissioners, this is a proposed ordinance that would extend the city's opt-out on recreational or adult use marijuana from February 1st of 2020 by 120 days to June 1st of 2020. Let me step back for a second and provide a little bit of background, a little bit of history, some of which you're probably aware of. Two forms of marijuana that have been legalized in the state of Michigan, the first being medical marijuana, the second being recreational or adult use marijuana. Under the medical marijuana framework, there is an affirmative obligation on the city to opt in to allow medical marijuana. That is, we have to take specific action to say that we will allow medical marijuana in the city of Royal Oak. On the other hand, the recreational or adult use marijuana, there is no affirmative option or obligation on the part of the city to allow a recreational or adult use marijuana. If you do not opt out, adult use recreational marijuana is admitted. So it's the exact opposite from the framework for medical marijuana. The way things stand right now, the city has not opted into medical marijuana. The city has opted out of adult use recreational marijuana, but the sunset date on that opt-out is February 1st of next year, 2020. And when the opt-out on adult use recreational marijuana was adopted, the comments from the commission was that they put the sunset clause in the ordinance to make sure that the process continued moving on a staff level and also at the commission table too. We believe that it has. In a separate item later in the agenda tonight, you have a recommendation from the Planning Commission as to what kind of zoning amendments would be appropriate to allow both medical marijuana and adult use recreational marijuana. On the other hand, I've provided you with drafts of, 2 working drafts of ordinances that would provide both for medical marijuana and adult use recreational marijuana from a licensing standpoint. Laura Bassett from Dickinson Wright, who you may recognize from the first public forum that we had, has been doing a lot of work on that, and we've appreciated all of her help on that while I've been busy wearing 2 hats in the city attorney's office. Those were presented to you to give you an idea where we stand at this point in time. Those aren't agenda items on tonight's agenda. As the mayor indicated, we're not asking for any kind of decisions on the licensing ordinances tonight. That was just to kind of give you an idea of where we're at, the fact that those are not simple issues, and the fact that we have been working diligently to get those issues to a point where we're ready to get some more formal input from the city commission on the issues that are involved in those licensing ordinances. So, given the complexity of the issues and the fact that we're still trying to work through and do all of our due diligence, we just don't think that at this point that the February 1st date is going to work. As I indicated in the memo, in order for us to have 2 readings on the zoning ordinance amendments, on the licensing ordinance for medical marijuana, the licensing ordinance for adult use or recreational marijuana, in order for those to be effective as of February 1st of 2020, we would have to take action on first reading tonight and action on second reading at our first meeting in January. We couldn't wait until the second meeting in January because the 10-day publication requirement under the charter wouldn't allow the ordinance to become effective. And I guess I should qualify my comments. Really, we're talking more about adult use recreational marijuana than medical marijuana, because until we opt in on the medical marijuana, that's not an issue. But with the adult use recreational, at this point in time, the February 1st date is an absolute date for the city. And if we don't have a framework in place at that point in time, by default, then we will allow the adult use recreational marijuana at that point in time. And anyone who has received the approval from the state to have a license will be able to come to the city and will be able to commence operation by virtue of the fact that we don't have a licensing mechanism in place. So we need some more time. And when I say we, I mean all of us collectively to get this done. What I would envision, again, I've given you the 2 licensing ordinances tonight. Laura is here tonight. We don't really intend to spend a great deal of time on those, but if you have questions or comments on those tonight for Laura and I, we'd be happy to take those. The conversations that I've had with her, what we're envisioning at this point in time, probably the best way to deal with those ordinances would be to look for a time, probably in January, where we can have a work session. And we can roll up our sleeves and we can dive into those in a little more detail. There are 2 particular points that I wanted to bring your attention and just to kind of plant the seed, if I will, things for you to be thinking about between now and whenever the time is that we actually schedule that work session. Number 1, you heard comment tonight during public comment about the micro business. And I know I've talked to a couple of commissioners that are interested in possibly trying to facilitate or allow that here in Royal Oak to encourage us like a small business aspect to the adult use recreational industry here in town. Candidly, the way this ordinance is written, it's not really friendly to that, and some of the timeframes may not work. What we're proposing to do with the ordinances in terms of some of the initial vetting is to have the state do the bulk of the work for us. The police department is very capable of doing background investigations on license applicants and things like that, along with the other relative departments, but really the state is the one that I think needs to do most of the work in terms of the initial screening. We'll still have the opportunity to do so. But the way that the state statute is set up, and to a certain extent the way this ordinance is set up, again, being very candid, it's not as friendly to smaller business as maybe you might want it to be. So think about that. That's something we can talk about. If you're comfortable with the framework the way it is, then that's fine. But I just want you to make an informed decision if and when the time comes to move forward with the kind of framework that we've got. The other deals more with the number of adult use and recreational and really medical marijuana establishments and facilities that would be allowing in the city. As I indicated, The next item, or the last item on the agenda today, is a recommendation regarding the zoning that would be allowed for establishments and facilities. The conversations that I've had with the staff in the Community Development Department, if we took a shoehorn and we crammed in just about every single establishment or facility that we could in town, given the zoning restrictions and the setback restrictions, the separation requirements between the different businesses, if we could like literally squeeze one into every, like the first corner of the first zoning district, and then go the minimum 1,000 feet and put another one in, and then another one, and so on, if we could saturate those zoning districts as much as we can within a regulatory framework, and I know that wouldn't happen because that's not the way the market's going to bear out, but for sake of discussion, say if we were able to do that, what they're indicating is we could probably get 18 or 19 different establishments into town. And that doesn't take into account the fact that the adult use recreational establishments can be stacked. You can have more than one type at the same location. So that's the number that we're kind of looking at right now, the way the zoning is set up. We also have the ability in the licensing ordinance to set a cap, to set a specific number of establishments that we're going to allow in town. But the caveat with that is that under the State Act, if there are more applicants that meet state eligibility requirements than our ordinance allows, than we're allowing under the cap, then we have to provide a competitive process to determine which one of those applicants for a license here in Royal Oak that has been approved by the state is actually going to get a license here in Royal Oak. The conversations that Laura and I have had, we have some major concerns about how we define and set up the, quote, competitive process. There is no definition. There's a very general definition of competitive process that's contained in the state law. And the feedback that I get from my fellow city attorneys and Laura gets from the attorneys that in her firm and in other law firms across the state is that just about everybody that's set up this, quote, competitive process, as they're moving forward, they end up getting sued because there is at least some discretionary aspect to the competitive process. Mm-hmm. And it's when you start exercising discretion is when you open the door for people to make arguments to a judge that you're abusing your discretion or you're not making sound decisions. So we don't have to have the competitive process for the marijuana, the medical marijuana establishments. That's not part of the first act, but that is part of the second act. So if we do rely on the cap on the number of establishments, then we have to have the competitive process. So I think what Laura and I are going to want to talk to you about is in some way or another, if 18 or 19 facilities and establishments is too much for the city of Royal Oak. And just anecdotally from what I hear from other communities that are allowing marijuana in their communities, that would be probably more than just about anybody else. It would be pretty high, pretty in the high end anyway. Not to say that we couldn't do that, but again, that's the decision you have to make. But what we're going to would like to talk to you about is maybe building another layer in somehow in terms of the zoning, some kind of a setback or some kind of an overlay, something like that, to maybe further restrict the parts of the city where the facilities and the establishments would be allowed to go to knock that number of 18 and 19 down. We feel that in going forward, in terms of our ability to defend a denial of a license application, that we're in a better position to defend that decision if the applicant isn't in a position to comply with zoning than it is to say under this competitive process, we chose somebody else. So again, those are the two things just to plant the seed when we get ready to sit down and talk at more length sometime after the first of the year. Those are two of the areas that we're going to want to talk to you about, and I'm sure there are going to be other areas that you're going to want to talk to about as well. So that's a long explanation. If you have questions, I'd be happy to try to answer those. Laura is also here if you have questions about the framework we're talking about right now. But to circle back to really what's on the agenda tonight, the ordinance that I've given you is to push out the opt-out date to June 1st, to give us a few more months to really sit down and talk with you, figure out what the commission wants to see in the ordinances, make some decisions. Do we have to kick things back to the planning commission? Are we comfortable keeping things at the table here? All those are details that we'll need to work out, but we need more time to do it. So I would recommend approval of the resolution, approving the ordinance on first reading.
Mr. Gillum, I appreciate the fact that, you know, when we look at it, I mean, this is our last meeting, and we'll have 2 meetings in January before February 1st, right? So for me, I know you've been pushing along. I know you've been wearing 2 hats here as well. And, you know, kind of when we first set up with this February 1st timeline, we had a city manager and a city attorney, and now we have I can't think of a clever way to combine attorney and manager together without maybe saying something inappropriate, so I won't try. But we have one individual wearing 2 hats and trying to get, you know, a lot of work done. So I think that, you know, it's not just Mr. Gillum. There's a lot of things we have going on right now, and as much as we push, sometimes we got to stop and reflect. And I think Commissioner Dubuck said it in the past. It's important that we just don't get something done, but that we, you know, make sure whatever we do is the very best thing for Royal Oak, considering all the factors involved. I don't feel comfortable with the February 1st timeline right now, just because we don't have the, I mean, to me, I see this ordinance that we have, a lot of great work, piece of clay, it's something to work with, but, you know, I need to spend an hour a page, and I didn't have 56 hours before coming to this meeting. And I also think the public really needs to process and digest, and, you know, we had some individuals come out tonight at public comment that are adding to the conversation. We've had folks reach out to us, emails and all of that, and I think the more that we can, this can be an iterative process and, you know, get more community input, we're just going to need some time to do that. So those are kind of my first thoughts. Anybody else have any thoughts? We'll go with Commissioner Macy.
I guess I'd want to hear a schedule, a timeline for what moving forward. 120 days seems like a long time, given that a lot of work has been done on this. Even as Mr. Gillum has had to wear these 2 hats, he's gotten some help and he's managed to make these 2 ordinances come to life already. I mean, we missed the state's November deadline. We gave ourselves some little leeway to February, and I totally agree that we can't get this done in February from where we are now. I don't know that we need to wait till June. And I think we want to be talking about this now. I mean, Mr. Gillum raised some good points of things that we're going to need to discuss that are going to go into this ordinance. I don't want to be pushing that off until February to have that discussion and then be waiting another month to have the ordinance revised and then another month for us to look at it again. I think we've been delaying on this already, and other cities are ahead of us in this process, and I'd rather they weren't. I agree that we want to do this deliberately. We don't want to just get something done. We want to get the right thing done. I think our staff have been doing a good job of getting us there, and we can move faster than June 1st. That's my opinion.
Anybody else? Commissioner Dubuck?
Sure. Yeah, the reason that we had originally put down the sunset was because, you know, nearly 70% of Royal Oakers voted in favor of Prop 1, and then we followed up with a survey, and that confirms Royal Oakers are definitely open to this. But yeah, we want to do it right. Clearly, we can't hit February 1st and have a really well thought out, socialized, vetted ordinance in place. I think a 5-month extension is a bit much, given that we do have the opportunity to extend again if we're in a tight spot, right? But I do want to keep momentum moving forward on this. I like the idea of having work groups. I have a lot of questions and thoughts about what we're looking at here, particularly around how do we encourage diversity in the industry so we don't just have like the big, huge players in our city, but we do want entrepreneurs and micro businesses to have a shot in the industry. I think that's one of the more exciting elements of this is, you know, put the product aside, the ability to bring a new industry to the market and all the people and jobs and economic activity that creates with it. So building that, you know, thoughtfully is important. So I'd be more comfortable, you know, with a April 1 extension, and if we have to extend again, fine. But we do need time to get a first reading passed with feedback, and then a second reading finalized, also with some time in there for the public to bring us their feedback, the industry and other stakeholders to bring us feedback, and we can fine tune it from there. So I'd be open to that, and especially if we're going to try and shoot for a work session sometime in January. That being said, I don't want to get into the weeds on what you have here tonight, because it's really it's pretty 50-page ordinance. But again, diversifying the industry is important, and I think we want to explore ways to do that to make sure that large and small players are welcome. I think 18, 19, just opening it up is probably too much, so I'm interested in exploring how do we cap it and expand with time once we know what we don't know, and we can fine tune going forward. I think once the genie's out of the bottle, it's going to be harder to fine tune an ordinance that works well for Royal Oakers and you know, for our city and for how we function here. So starting small and evolving with time makes sense to me. And we want to do it legally. I understand everyone's getting sued. So as for a work group discussion, I would like to explore, or at least maybe have you all explore. I've heard about point systems and rating systems, and I've heard about lotteries, and I'm curious if there's a possibility of like a hybrid system where you have an assessment where you hit a certain threshold and you get to end of the lottery because you've qualified, and then there's a lottery where a judge literally just pulls the qualifying applicant for one. I don't know, is that insane? You can tell me.
Again, anecdotally, I've heard that I think the city of Grand Rapids might have had something similar like to that for their medical marijuana establishments. And in hindsight, again, anecdotally, I'm hearing that a lot of the people aren't happy with the candidates that ended up being chosen.
So yeah, it's a mix of two, because we need to insulate ourselves against the appearance of like playing favorites, because obviously people are banging down the door to get into this industry, and particularly in our city. But how do
I'm sorry to interrupt, but just one other comment too. And if we have this competitive process put in place, I know that the planning department, their phone lines have been burning up for several months, and the phone lines in the city attorney's office have been ringing quite a bit, and the phone lines in the manager's office have been ringing quite a bit. Well, guess what? All of your emails and all of your phone numbers, everybody that is going to want to make a pitch is going to be contacting you if they already haven't, if we set up some kind of a competitive process.
Well, and I think even rules of governance for how commissioners should interact with those stakeholders. It's not uncommon for like a business owner with a beef or a developer with an interest to reach out and ask questions. But given the, I think, intensity around this, is probably some rules of engagement would be helpful so that we're all on the same page. So that's one thing. Another thing is, if we don't have a license cap, and you're saying so 18, 19 across all types potentially in our city, does that just mean first come, first serve? Like whoever enters the process and then qualifies, they're it? Like they get it and that's it?
I think so, yes.
Whoever gets the property, right?
That seems equally crazy and inequitable, right? Yes. So there's got to be a way to figure that out. And then lastly, one thing I want a little more clarity on, we talked about in one of our earlier work sessions, and I think our draft ordinance is based on the premise that we opt in for all. There is no ability for us to say we want this, we don't want that, but I keep getting mixed opinions from other attorneys on this. You're our attorney, I take your word for it, but have we fully vetted that with other cities and folks that are expert in this? Like, there is no way to build the zoning so that we're allowing this many of this and this many of that. We're 100% clear on that, or is it just because it's so ambiguous we don't know and we need to be on the safe side?
With the adult use recreational marijuana of the 5 different categories of licenses?
Ms. Bessie?
Yeah, Laura, I'll let you, that's a tough question, you take that one.
So just to get to your, yes, on the adult use, you can cap or restrict or limit specific types. So that's certainly, you're certainly able to do that.
So you could say 3 micro businesses or something like that. But you can't say, well, we're going to allow micro businesses, but we're not going to allow the other types of retail establishments, generally.
No, you could. You can, so there are different types of licenses, and the key, though, is to decide, even more so than what you do want, is what you don't want, if you want
to completely, opt out, so to speak, of one type of marijuana establishment. Because for adult use, you need to specifically prohibit certain types if you don't want them. If you want all types, then you have to work out some sort of cap and competitive system for each, but otherwise, absolutely, you can certainly limit by type.
Okay, and so then we could also do that through what we're doing with our zoning, and we could have an overlay district that in that district allows for a micro business, but not other types.
You could, yeah, and there are a couple of exceptions to that in that, for example, if you're going to opt into medical marijuana, and you have medical marijuana, and you have within your zoning requirements, you allow medical marijuana establishments in certain places, then in those places, you cannot prohibit a recreational establishment from locating there. So co-location is, if, again, the city allows medical marijuana, you cannot prohibit co-location. So there are some exceptions to that, but. Yeah.
So Ms. Bassett, just to be clear, if we don't go down the medical marijuana chain, let's just say we leave that parsed off, because that's a whole other complicated issue onto itself, but let's just say this is the only thing we're talking about and focused on, then we could say, like, we want 3 micros and 0 retails. And we could put that in, and that would be acceptable under state law.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
So that's it for my questions now. I think we do need some time, like a multi-hour work session to dig in on the verbiage of this, but those are my couple bits of feedback of things that I would like to be able to discuss in depth and have you all prepared to discuss in depth.
Absolutely.
Diversification, better understanding of how we limit and then grow over time without getting sued every which way. Yeah, those are my 2 things.
Yeah, and I'll just add,
just the timing. But we'll do that tonight.
And I think a lot of folks have talked about the economics and whatnot, and, everybody has different issues with various elements of, Prop 1, but when I put my economic hat on, one of my concerns, one of the griefs in the downtown that we had for years was, people buying property, leaving them vacant, letting them go, and we still have that issue a little bit, waiting for that next big bar to come in and bring in, waiting for rents to go high, and it's, basically it's property speculating. And I think in a community as vibrant as ours, I get concerns where we have, maybe out-of-state folks, people that have millions of dollars to spend, they don't care what happens to Royal Oak tomorrow, the next day, or, 10 years from now, and how do we, ensure that we, have whatever transpires doesn't create a speculative situation for this green rush where everyone's going to make $1 million, and our properties get tied up in good businesses, don't get their leases renewed, and all of a sudden now we lose that business, and some billionaire's like, oh well, I guess it didn't work out in Royal Oak, and we hit a bear market, and things are, now we've lost a gem of a business because they couldn't renew their lease, versus if a few licenses are allowed, how do we get the owner-operator, salt-of-the-earth people, at least having responsibility versus, outside, big money interests, and not to prevent them, but at least create some sort of risk management for the city when it comes to some of the negative consequences of these types of, I'll say gold rush, but, green rush, I guess, to be creative.
And there are ways to structure, I will add, there are ways to structure your ordinance so that you do achieve those goals, still within state law, so.
Okay.
And
that's what a great workshop would be about,
Absolutely.
is we can just talk and iterative and map, and then, the public would be there, and then we could really hash out, because there's a whole, like I see all these buckets of concerns. You have economic, you have, small business versus big business, you have the negative consequences of marijuana and some of the things that, I agree. Look, everyone can have their own opinion, but I also don't want to see Woodward with like 19, green plus signs, and, you're coming into Royal Oak, and we have all these amazing retailers on Woodward, and now all of a sudden we go from being sort of this eclectic shopping district on Woodward to, this is the place, where it becomes like a little mini marijuana strip. It's not to say, I'm a no on everything. I'm just saying we want to protect against, certain images that we want to project as a city, and we don't want speculators to come in and then, now Woodward Avenue goes from being this historic, iconic thing with maybe a few mix of shops to all of a sudden just every other store is a one type of business, I wouldn't want it to be all auto mechanics either, or all ice cream stores. So, Commissioner Macy.
Yeah, I'm just jumping in to agree with you. So I think this is mostly for the work session, but given that you and Commissioner Dubuck said some things that made me think about them, I want to say them right now while I've got Mr. Gillum here. So I think you're right, and Mr. Gillum's probably right that it won't happen overnight that we'd get those 19, but this is going to be a very profitable business, I would guess. And so I think the people who own those 19 properties, the smart business thing for them to do would be to get out whoever's in there and say, hey, I'm open for marijuana. And that seems to me, as Commissioner Dubuck said, just as random, if not more so, than the way that we would otherwise do it with the competitive process. And I think with the competitive process, we have to be resigned that we're going to get sued. This is a new state law. We have not worked out the kinks, and that is what the law does. Like, you get sued, you figure out what you're allowed to do, when you're not allowed to do, and you fix it the next time around. We can do our best to draft the best ordinance we can. I would be surprised if there's any way we can do this where we don't get sued. And I think that's going to be true for every city around the state that's doing this. And we have some advantage of letting them do some things first, and we'll see what they get sued on, and we won't do that. But the fact that you said Grand Rapids, that they weren't happy with the quality that they got out of that hybrid system, just indicates to me that there was probably too much randomness in there, that people really do care about the quality of the businesses that we're letting in. And we want it to be more of a process where we're picking the best applicants than where we're just rolling the dice. That's all I'm saying.
Commissioner Douglas.
The draft language that you submitted to us has many requirements for applicants, the types of businesses, who has to register, background checks, et cetera, et cetera. Is that different from the state licensing requirement? Or is it designed to parallel or duplicate, in fact, the state's requirements?
That is, and if you're referring to I did have, include some language in there that provides sort of a sample competitive process, not that you would have to adopt it, but as much as possible, replicate, what the state is doing. Keep in mind too, when just to get back to some of the other comments that were made, that the state is going to issue, it already has started issuing licenses to anybody who is, complies with the state law and is otherwise complying with the local ordinance wherever they want to set up shop. They're just going to issue those licenses. So the state does, in fact, have a, random first-come process. And so it's up to the local units then to put something else in if you want to, as long as it does, again, comply with that state law. So yes, those requirements are really intended to sort of follow what the state is doing and add just a little bit more, perhaps, if the city would like to do something a little bit more. But those are meant to be tweaked depending on what you specifically would like for Royal Oak.
Just looking at the application process and not knowing anything about it, it seems very onerous. And yet, my question is, can they cut and paste stuff out of their state application into what you roughly drafted?
Absolutely.
Okay, that was my question.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yep.
And some of the information that's in there isn't going to be required of all the applicants because it depends what form. Is it a corporation? Is it an LLC? Is it some kind of a partnership? Some of the language in the ordinance, the different sections, is redundant because it's only going to apply to that particular class of applicant.
So in further questioning, Mr. Gillum, have you put together a timetable of this, when we have commission meetings and when they're planning commission meetings and the steps, what will happen at every step of the way?
I haven't. Other than keeping an eye on the February 1st date up to this point in time. But that's obviously something we can do. Yeah.
There's nothing that says if we move this to June 1, there's nothing that says you can't complete the process before June 1, which is what I'd like to see happen. And so, I mean, there are two possible courses of action here, both of which involve you putting together a timetable with the steps in the process that would lead us to all of this, and ultimately opening a window, as you've described in your drafts here. So I would say either we as a commission may agree with the June 1 date, or we might want to postpone this decision until next month when you can bring us a timetable that shows either getting this done sooner or justifies not getting it done till June 1st. So I guess I'll take a swing at that and make that motion to postpone this decision till our next meeting, sensing that there is agreement here at the table that we do want to delay the decision, but not being maybe sure how soon.
Okay, and we have a second by Commissioner DeBuck. Mr. Gill? I have a question. A question?
Okay, so with all respect, let's think about the schedule that we have to look at right now. Unless we want to talk about a special meeting in January. If the commission doesn't move this ordinance on first reading tonight, it's not going to be done by February 1st. We have a meeting on January 13th as our next regularly scheduled commission meeting. If the ordinance to extend the opt-out is approved on first reading on January 13th, our next meeting is January 27th,
okay.
2 weeks after that. It'll be 10 days before the extension becomes effective. That would be after February 1st.
It's 7 days for people to sneak in.
The clock will have already struck midnight, if you will.
Okay, I understand.
What I could, maybe as an alternative, or maybe as a compromise here at the table, make a recommendation that you approve the ordinance on first reading tonight, and when we come back for second reading on January 13th, I will have a proposed time frame for you at that point in time. And then you can weigh in on it, and we can maybe massage that, hopefully come to an understanding on that on the 13th, then you can approve the ordinance on second reading, or at a different date, whatever. But I'll have, bottom line is I can have a time frame for you at our next meeting when this comes back on second reading.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Douglas, second by Commissioner Gibbs. Discussion on the motion. We'll go to Commissioner Lavasser first.
Yeah, I think that Mr. Gilman has already made this clear, but basically we're just looking at attachment number 3 that's on the memo, that one pager that basically just says we're changing the date.
Absolutely correct. Yeah. Attachments 1 or 2, and Laura has done the bulk of the work on those, absolutely, and I appreciate all her help with that. But yeah, that's just for informational purposes, because I know the commission has felt very serious about trying to move the process forward, and I just wanted you to see the amount of work that's been done on those licensing ordinances so far. That's all. But yeah, it's only attachment 3, the extension on the opt-out.
Commissioner Paruch and Commissioner DeBuck.
In terms of the competitive framework that we're reluctant, or at least some of us, I think, are reluctant to set into place because of the potential for litigation, Michigan is not the first state to legalize this and not the first state to deal with some of these issues. And I know that each state is different and each state law is different, but I'm wondering if you've had an opportunity, or if others in the industry have had an opportunity to look at what other states have done in terms of that competitive framework versus, a numerical quota we're only going to allow 5 type of thing. Are they so different that it's really not worthwhile to take a look at those?
Good question. When they are, yes, we have looked at what other states are doing, and when you get down to the details like that, they are different. Keep in mind too, even Michigan's medical marijuana ordinances does not require any kind of competitive system. So that's very specific to the Michigan adult use marijuana statute.
Yes.
And the way that it's worded, in fact, without any, it must establish a competitive process to choose the applicants that are best suited to comply with state statute and local ordinances. It's sort of which ones are best likely to follow the law, so to speak. That's what the competitive process has to achieve in Michigan.
And that is fairly unique in terms of how other states are doing it?
Yes.
Okay. All right. That was my question. Thank you.
Commissioner DeBuck.
Oh, I just wanted to make it clear that my wanting to up to date to keep it up is not, clearly there's 60 pages written here, make it clear that you're not dragging your feet on this at all, that we are making progress, and I certainly recognize that. Just want to make sure that we are, I like the idea of maybe when you come back with second reading of having a timetable in place, if that's possible, so that we can make, when we passed our original opt-out with the intention of coming back and getting this done, all the papers like Royal Oak opts out, you know, and that was the headline, even though that was not our intent. So I just want to make sure that our intent to the public is clear, that we are continuing to work on this and we're not going to continue to punt, that we do have an end in sight.
And I'll just say, fair enough point too with planning, correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, but we had a pretty aggressive timeline to get the planning recommendation in front of the city commission as well, which took a couple extra times because I think at one time we didn't have a full planning commission. We wanted to hear from a couple other people. So, the process was also affected by an appointed body that votes on things that, came out a little slower for the right reasons. I mean, we didn't have a full crew there and we wanted input from everybody. So, things like this happen. I mean, that's why you account for these contingencies and, that's okay. So, Commissioner Macy.
On second reading, we can't change the date, right?
Yes.
We can?
Yes.
Oh, lovely.
Yes.
Good. All right, so we have a motion on the table. Any other discussion? Okay, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. Okay, thank you, Ms. Bassett, for all your efforts. And we'll get that in January 13th. And probably with that timeline, some recommendations as far as when we can do the workshop in January sometime, I think is what you recommended. And it'll probably be the most efficient way to get all of our initial questions and everything out there and then try to, reacclimate the public with where we stand, what things we've discussed, which things still need to be discussed, and what more information we need from our residents to help inform our decisions. So,
And I just, if it's okay, I just want to remind and assure all of you that, I don't represent any marijuana businesses. I don't represent anyone in the marijuana industry. I work for you all. So really to whatever is in the best interest of the city, but also to try to reduce, if not eliminate, risk. So, to advise you of that. So, thank you.
thank you.
If I could, maybe all of you can bring your calendars with you for that January 13th meeting so we can maybe try to nail down some dates too, collectively.
We can do that. All right, so we are going to talk about that one next meeting. So now that brings us to item number 13, which is the Planning Commission recommendation, zoning ordinance rezoning 111, 121, and 309 North Main Street, first reading. Mr. Twing.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the commission. You do have a recommendation from the Planning Commission to change the zoning on 3 properties or 3 addresses from general business to neighborhood business. There are a few reasons for this. One of them is related to marijuana and the potential to allow marijuana establishments in general business. The others are related to the fact that these are the only 3 pieces of property along North Main Street, 11 Mile, that are still left in general business. The other properties several years ago were changed to neighborhood business. The other ones that are identified in gray on the map are zone PUD. Those used to be in general business. So these are the only couple of properties that are left in that zoning district. That zoning district also allows automobile-related type activities, which really don't fit in anymore along North Main Street or Main Street in general. So there are several reasons why I think the Planning Commission is forwarding this recommendation to you, as well as the fact that if you do adopt the draft marijuana provisions, it would allow marijuana establishments in this district as a special land use. Given that the Planning Commission is also recommending that there not be those establishments in the downtown, I think they forwarded this to you to rezone these properties. So for that reason, I don't see any reason to hold this up. If you're supportive of the rezoning on first reading, I would suggest you pass the resolution that's contained in the staff memo, and we would bring that back to you in the second reading at your next meeting.
Questions for Mr. Twing? Commissioner Macy.
This question's actually for Mr. Gillum. Is it at all problematic that we're essentially rezoning our downtown to cherry pick where we want marijuana establishments? Does this not open us up to potential problems?
As Mr. Twing indicated, there are a couple different reasons why the Planning Commission, the staff, and then the Planning Commission has recommended the rezoning of these properties. I mean, obviously we can't guarantee anything, but I'm comfortable that the risk is minimal if this rezoning is challenged.
If you look at the transition just in the last couple of years, the number of residential units that have gone up for multifamily right there, you went from having Billings to having some apartments/condominiums. You have the Icon. It's not such a conducive, it's a neighborhood now, and you have a few straggling properties where, you know, it's not a marijuana business, but it could be anything. I mean, now that these buildings are coming on board, they're underway, they're being built, you know, I think it makes sense for it to be rezoned for things that are more of a neighborhood business versus, you know, something high-intense use that disrupts the overall redesign of the neighborhood over the last few years, going from dealerships and auto repair centers and lawn equipment suppliers to beautiful residential buildings necessitates the change, in my opinion. Commissioner Macy.
Okay, so now I do have a question for Mr. Twing. Could you talk about what the difference in terms of what is allowed in general business versus neighborhood business?
Well, I think the largest thing is, as I said, they're more auto-related business, billings, gas stations, drive-throughs, several types of those operations that are related to the automobile that are not allowed in neighborhood business. Adult facilities.
That's not allowed in our downtown anyway, right?
It's too close to a church, it won't happen, but you can put
We're talking
adult.
about foster care, right, for adult aging population?
Talking strip clubs and.
Okay. Commissioner Paruch.
The property at 111 North Main at the corner there, which is now condominiums, used to be an automotive-related business. I don't know whether it was part of the Mercury dealership that was in town or whether it was just an automotive repair facility, but that probably dictated why it is zoned the way it is, because that was a category that allowed automotive-related businesses. I can't recall what used to exist up at 309 North Main, but that also might have been automotive-related. In fact, they may have had that whole block extending all the way from 11 Mile up to University. But I do know that at the corner of 11 in Main, that was automotive for decades before it went to something else, and then now the condos are there.
You're correct. There used to be a gas station on the northeast corner. There used to be a Goodyear on the northeast corner. There was a motorcycle sales shop on University and in the southeast corner. So it's changed quite a bit. And again, the recommendation is to take it out of general business, so it would not allow those types of uses, or if you pass the marijuana provisions, it would not allow those either.
Commissioner Douglas?
Yeah, I would like to move approval of option 1. Adopt the rezoning request upon first reading with or without modification in this case, and direct staff to prepare the application for final disposition.
Motion by Commissioner Douglas. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Paruch. Discussion? Commissioner Douglas?
Mr. Twing has summarized it accurately. We did have a public hearing at the Planning Commission. We had no one come forward to comment on this rezoning. It's just making the zoning consistent with what we have there and what we're going to have there for the foreseeable and even the unforeseeable future.
Any other discussion? All right, with none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
Motion passes. All right. right, this brings us to item number 14, which is the Planning Commission recommendation zoning ordinance text amendments marijuana and medical marijuana facilities first reading. Mr. Twing.
The recommendation from the Planning Commission, you may recall that the staff provided a draft ordinance to the Commission back in July at your work session on the 22nd. This ordinance is pretty similar to that one that you reviewed at that meeting. Since that time, the Planning Commission has met on it in regards, I believe, their August meeting, their October meeting, and their November meeting. I think from recollection, the primary change from the July discussion was it included some additional provisions regarding types of lighting that may be put on a building, as well as signage. And then the Planning Commission also took out the setback requirement between growers, processors, and compliance facilities and things like that that may be allowed in the industrial district under a special land use. So from July 22nd until that recommendation from the Planning Commission, as I recall, those are the primary changes. As the report indicates, or the Commission letter indicates, in the summary, I think is the simplest way to look at it. The proposed or recommended text amendments deal with definitions both for marijuana establishments and medical marijuana facilities. Those definitions are taken from each of the statutes. The marijuana retail and micro businesses, as well as medical marijuana provisioning centers, would be allowed as a special land use, both in the general industrial and the general business zoning districts. Medical and marijuana growers, processors, and safety compliance facilities and/or transporter businesses would be allowed in the general industrial. No marijuana uses would be allowed under this provision in the commercial zoning districts, which include office service, neighborhood business, the central business district, regional business, or either of the mixed-use 1 or 2 zoning districts. Special land uses for all of these would be subject to the City Commission's final approval upon a recommendation from the Planning Commission. There are only a few of those types of special land uses that float up to the City Commission following a recommendation from the Planning Commission. One is the residential restricted parking lots, parking lot that may be adjacent to a business but located in a one-family residential zone. So there aren't a lot of uses that, special land uses that float up to the Commission for final decision. Most are done at the Planning Commission, but given that you're considering licensing these facilities as well, it was staff's thought that you would do both at the same time. You would be issuing a license. At the same meeting, you might be approving a special land use, and we'd try to coordinate that through. Applications for the special land use permit would have to provide documentation that they're pre-qualified status from the appropriate state agencies, as well as have a complete application that's been accepted by the city, or that we would not process them through the Planning Commission as a special land use. Some of the provisions that are in here, they would need a 1,000-foot setback from any K-12 school, or they would not be allowed. There are no setback requirements from religious institutions, parks, or residential zoned areas. There's also a 1,000-foot setback between retailers, micro businesses, and provisioning centers. There are no setbacks required between the growers, processors, and compliance facilities. Those, again, would all be located in the industrial district, and that was one of the recommendations coming out of the Planning Commission. Designated consumption establishments or excess marijuana growers are prohibited in all districts under the draft ordinance.
Temporary marijuana events and event organizers are also specifically prohibited unless the city commission approves them under some other ordinance, i.e. you approved a special event permit for a temporary marijuana event. Rather than that, the zoning ordinance would prohibit them. It also would prohibit drive-through walk-up windows for marijuana facilities. Then it also has some limitations regarding signage and lighting, as I indicated previously, as well as some architectural things that might be done to the building that would draw attention to it. Those things are some things the Planning Commission was concerned about, as well as security curtains and metal bars and how they're placed on any building. They're recommending that you have some sort of green infrastructure as part of the site plan requirement, unless the City Commission chose to not require those provisions. And then you've got the ability to address some impacts that may occur on individual sites if you need to impose something in terms of how they're under special land use provisions. Parking standards for the retail and provisioning centers would be the same parking requirements that we currently have for medical office and/or convenience stores. Basically, that's one space for every 200 square feet of usable square footage. The processing and growing facilities would have similar standards to the manufacturing facilities or warehouse, and I believe that's one space for every 800 square feet of usable. In terms of operational standards of a marijuana facility, the zoning ordinance simply is going to reference whatever licensing ordinance you adopt. It's not to recommend, and there are no operational items within the zoning ordinance. There's nothing about hours of operation, time of day, those sorts of things. It was, again, the thought and the discussion that those would all become part of any licensing requirement or licensing ordinance, and rather than having to go back and forth and make sure they're consistent, we're just referencing them. I think that's the bullet points that are in the commission letter provide that summary. But if you have any other questions, I'd be happy to address them.
Questions for Mr. Twing? Commissioner Macy?
So I don't quite understand this. It's very complicated. But one thing that I heard was that the 1,000 feet between retailers and provisioning centers, I thought there was something that was said about co-location and how it was required to allow co-location.
What we're referring to is that if you have one location that has a marijuana license, and it may have 2 licenses, it may have 3.
Okay.
It's then I need a distance before another one can locate.
Okay. And then so the setbacks between the grow facilities was taken away, but not between the retailers. I wonder if you could talk about the thought behind that.
Well, I believe, and I don't want to speak for the Planning Commission members that are here, that was really coming from the Planning Commission board in terms of potentially the number of grow facilities or processors. If they co-located a retailer in there as well, then that distance would apply. But if it was simply a grow facility, it was their recommendation that there's no need to have a distance between another grow facility, and that would allow, I think, more to occur, was the thought of the Planning Commission members. I don't want to put words in their mouths, but that came from them in terms of striking that separation requirement.
Okay, and so that maybe answers my next question. So the 1,000 feet between the retailers, the idea for that was to have fewer possible locations, to minimize the number, I guess?
Yes.
Because it seems to me kind of would be preferable to have, like, if you're going to have 2 or 3, you might as well have them in one little spot. But I understand the idea that you need to keep the number down by making these radiuses that will...
Well, and I think that was discussed in terms of the distance between them, and I believe the Planning Commission felt it was better to start with a greater distance that is allowed by the statute. And then if you want to reduce it in the future, you can. So you could, in the future, reduce it from 1,000 to 500 or to 200 if you wanted to have more. But if you started at a lower requirement, it's going to be next to impossible to expand the distance between if they created problems.
That's not one of the things that's waivable by the city commission, though, in the ordinance?
I believe we're allowing you under the zoning ordinance to allow any provision.
Oh, and then I didn't get about the architectural. It's like you don't want it to look nicer? I didn't. With the architectural restrictions, like you said something like.
Well, architectural enhancements that were designed to draw attention to the building, and those could be a variety of things that are just attention grabbers. You know, oversized parapet walls, you know,
An Eiffel Tower sitting on top of the roof, you know.
So.
Okay.
A neon leaf.
Okay, and then the other thing I had to say was that it reads to me the way that it's written that only schools that have K through 12 inclusive are included in this, and I know that's not the intention. We intend it to be, you know, elementary and middle, and all of those would be included. I'm just saying that to me it reads that if it has the K through 12 curriculum, then that's what the setback applies to. Just my thought on that.
I think the intent of that is any school that has.
I know what the intent is. I'm just telling you how it reads.
But I think when we discussed it, it was any school. I mean, colleges like OCC wouldn't apply or whatever, but anybody that has, if you just had a high school or if you had an elementary school, would be covered in that K through 12 bracket. If you just had one of those grades.
So as a lawyer, I think it should be clear.
Commissioner Paruch?
I'm curious as to how the board came up with a 1,000-foot setback, because we've expressed some concern about numbers, and perhaps the 1819 is a lot more than we would like to see in the city. And it occurs to me that one of the things that you could do to cut that number down would be to say, oh, it's a 2,000-foot setback, not a 1,000-foot setback. Is there a reason why the Plan Commission recommended 1,000 feet?
I believe that the statute talks about 1,000 feet is that's the start point.
Oh.
It's the maximum permitted.
We can go less than that, but I don't believe we can go any higher.
Okay. All right. Well, then we can't do that. Okay.
To recap some of the I mean, we took a really, you know, sitting on planning, you know, it's a little bit more challenging for the commissioners that sit on planning, Commissioner Douglas and I, because, you know, there are other things we have to consider, but, you know, to at least get through the process of having a piece of clay, throwing something back at the commission to get all of your insights and thoughts on, we did move conservative as far as limiting the zones where this could happen and maximizing setbacks and maximizing distance between the facilities and distance between churches and schools to really just, you know, not just to minimize the number, but also, you know, there's a lot we don't know about this. There's a lot of uncertainty. And maybe all of any fears and everything like that aren't true and unfounded, and we find that out in 5 years and we can tweak things to our benefit. Maybe they are all true and we did what we could do to the extent that the state statute allows us to do, and we're at least protected to the extent that we can. So we started from a more conservative approach, knowing that, you know, as we get learnings, we can, you know, work with the levers if we have to. Maybe we don't. Commissioner Dubak.
So just to make sure I'm clear, this would allow for special event requests under our current special events ordinance to go through the police department and then be put before the commissioner? You're saying we would have to amend our special events ordinance?
I'll defer to the city attorney as to whether or not you'd need new provisions under the special event ordinance. The zoning ordinance is going to prohibit them unless something else allows them.
Okay. All right. And then this currently prohibits the licensing of any consumption establishments, meaning
not the licensing, to keep the licensing, but the zoning ordinance is saying that consumption establishments aren't going to be permitted anywhere. So.
And then it says also it prohibits excess marijuana growers.
Correct.
What is the reasoning for that?
I think because the Planning Commission took away the distance requirements. You can have them next door to each other. You can have more. And we probably don't have a facility that's large enough to be considered excess growing. Just didn't seem to fit.
Okay. I was wondering, I didn't know if that was inappropriate use for any of our big old industrial spaces that are unused right now. But you're saying there's nothing that would work for that designation. But so that falls under us being able to pick and choose what we are not allowing?
There's a couple specific classes of license that we are allowed to completely prohibit, and that's one of them. Yes.
Okay. Other questions for Mr. Twain?
I think too, some of the things that, can be, I mean, at least in the medical field, some of the things that we've seen, in other areas of the state, maybe in other parts of the country, like the big neon signs, the big marketing, all of that, certainly, this ordinance also tries to address and make sure that, these businesses are at least as discreet as possible versus, a big flashing light, marijuana here, come and get it. I mean, for all the reasons that, we wouldn't want that on a car dealership, or we wouldn't want it on, any sort of business. So, taking the opportunity to make sure that, it's not some of these things don't become a nuisance in our city from a marketing, advertising, and design element, that we've seen, at least in the industry. Some of those things we tried to attack in the ordinance as well. Commissioner Dubak? Commissioner Douglas?
So in the draft licensing agreement, I'll ask Mr. Gilliman or Ms. Bassett this, there was a provision in there that talked about no retailer or micro business shall be located within, and then in brackets, 250 feet from any of the following: public park, church or house of worship, City of Royal Oak property zoned bracket residential. Is that just a placeholder or something for us to consider?
It is, yes. That's the kind of language that some other communities have adopted, so that it includes all of those types of locational requirements. So it is a placeholder, yes.
Okay, because one of the things we learned at the Planning Commission was, well, in their early maps, staff drew maps that drew a 1,000-foot radius around schools and a 1,000-foot radius.
Yeah.
Yes. Geometry around churches, but state law does not recognize churches as a protected use as it does schools. And in fact, when we looked at the circles drawn by churches, there were very few of those radiuses that would affect general business zoning. So that was why churches were immaterial in our discussion. So that's all. And I will point out that we did have a public hearing on this at the Planning Commission. Before we did, I posted information about it in social media groups that reach 20,000 people. Now, we'll acknowledge that maybe there's some duplication of people across those groups, but still, we had 8 people speak at public comment on this, 4 of whom work in the industry, just to give you a sense of the sense of urgency in the community on this subject, or lack thereof.
So, Commissioner Dubak.
Thank you. Just for clarity on the consumption establishments, what that means, you basically can't bill yourself as a consumption establishment. I think most people are understanding this move toward legalization. I think people think of like everyone smoking joints everywhere, but a huge portion of the industry is consumables. So by saying that you can't have a consumption establishment means that can't be your business model, but does it mean if someone in a coffee house eats jelly beans, that are a consumable, can someone call the cops on that, or is that a question for our ordinance as far as what's a public space?
There is a definition of consumption establishment in the front of the ordinance, and if it required a consumption license from the state in order to do so, my reaction would be no, you're not permitted.
To say like people are welcome to, but that's not your business model, right? So I'm saying it gets a little murky, right? I want to understand what it is exactly we're regulating and what people's rights are under the law.
Are you asking, is your question more based on, like, if I walk into Starbucks and eat a gummy bear that's, laced with THC versus this legislation here, where I think what we're talking about consumption establishments, we're talking about like you can see in the Netherlands, like the space cake, like buy your cake and sit at the table and eat your marijuana cake or whatever they call it. I think that's what the consumption provision is, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
again, I'm going to look at it from the definition in the zoning ordinance as well as the state statute, and if you need that license, we're not going to permit it in town. If you don't need that license and you're consuming on site, that's more of a police matter. That are you violating any code from, unless Mr. Gillum has a different opinion. I'm going to treat the zoning ordinance and land use based on the definition in the statute, and do you need this license? And if you're operating under that, you don't have either, then we would take code enforcement action to shut you down.
Okay. So I guess this gets at something that maybe we want to explore a little bit more in our work session, which is, in our first few work sessions, we talked about it, one of the legal complications about what's a public space, where do we regulate, where people can consume and where they can't. So this is a specific business type that requires a license, but as far as what we allow and where we allow it and what our authority is under the law to do that, that's something we have to explore more and put into our ordinance. Is that right? Yep.
Or not put in the ordinance, or maybe just make people aware of how this is going to play out.
Okay. All right, thanks. Commissioner Douglas?
Just to say that I think the Planning Commission's approach was very conservative. I'll address the topic of micro businesses. I mean, I personally like that idea, that kind of business model, but we want to, the Planning Commission wanted to take baby steps. Let's start this, let's be quite conservative and see how it plays out, and then we can always lessen our restrictions if we decide there are things that we want. If we want consumption establishments, if we want to decrease the radius around protected buildings or between related businesses.
Commissioner DuBuck?
To clarify, this doesn't forbid the micros, they're just at a competitive disadvantage in what we've laid out here, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is something.
Yeah, there's other things you could address in the licensing and with caps and things of that nature that Ms. Bassett brought up. So it's kind of this weird blend of, you're talking about consumption of, public places, like, okay, what are our ordinances that really deal with policing? What are our licensing ordinances? And then, our planning, which is going to beg the question to me a little bit here. I mean, I know we have this here on first reading. We just passed, at least on first reading, the extension of the prohibition on marijuana establishments. Is there any action needed on this tonight? If, because I feel like there's some pieces in here that overlay and blend into licensing and that really need to be part of the workshop discussion. And I don't know, is there an urgency to pass this when, 2 agenda items before we essentially are having an extension on prohibition?
I mean, personally, I don't see an urgency to move on the zoning ordinance text amendments tonight.
Okay.
It's going to take 2 readings to make these text amendments effective, or modified text amendments. It's going to take 2 readings at some point down the road to make the licensing ordinances effective as well. I mean, I think what Tim and I have talked about so far is, to the extent possible, trying to keep the zoning ordinance provisions and the licensing ordinance provisions on somewhat the same track here at the City Commission.
So what would be the appropriate action if we didn't want to do anything tonight, since it says first reading here? Just nothing?
No action, or if you wanted to, you just, a motion would be to postpone any action pending further discussion on the licensing ordinances.
Commissioner Vassar?
I think this is probably the timing is something that Mr. Gillum in his report to us at the first meeting in January could probably be incorporated at that time. I suspect that there's no need for us to take any action.
Okay. Everyone's comfortable with that? Okay, so I'll wait a moment of silence to see if there's any motions.
Move to postpone.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Douglas. There's seconded by Commissioner DuBuck. Discussion? All right, with none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. All right, so that brings us to the end of our agenda. Notwithstanding anything for the betterment of our community, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Commissioner DuBuck.
I will, with wishes of a very happy holiday and New Year to all of you and everyone in our city, I will move to adjourn.
We have a motion by Commissioner DuBuck. Is someone going to second that one? Second by Commissioner Macy. Discussion? Can't believe we all coordinated on accident these lovely sweaters ahead of the holiday season. It's so crazy.
See you all at the Hanukkah celebration.
That's right. 29th.
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 With the menorah.
Call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion passes. Adjourned.